With a single laugh, Rosalise Jenkins, a penniless artist, shattered the polished facade of a Millionaire's art gala, exposing a prized painting as a fraud. Her fearless declaration ignited a firestorm, transforming her from an outsider to a visionary in a world ruled by wealth and prestige. This is a tale of raw talent defying convention, of a collector, Eddie Blackwood, humbled by truth and drawn to the brilliance he overlooked. From rivalry to romance, their journey redefines success and love. Will Rosalise's courage topple the art world's elite? Can Eddie embrace the genius he first dismissed? Join us, share your city in the comments, and hit subscribe to uncover every twist. How will one bold moment reshape their lives? Will their bond survive the spotlight? Dive into this vibrant story of art and heart to find out how a spark of truth painted a legacy. The rain battered the cracked windows of Rosalise Jenkins's tiny apartment, a relentless drumbeat that matched the restless rhythm of her heart. Inside, the air smelled of turpentine and dreams. The walls a chaotic gallery of her paintings, vivid bursts of color that told stories no one had ever heard. At 24, Rosalise was a paradox, a painter of breathtaking talent, yet invisible to the world. By day, she scrubbed floors or waited tables. By night, her brushes danced across canvases, weaving tales of resilience and rebellion. Her latest piece, a stormy seascape with a lone figure defying the waves, lay half-finished on an easel, its raw energy mirroring her own. That evening, as thunder rumbled, a sodden flyer slipped under her door, its gold-embossed letters glinting under the flickering bulb. Blackwood Art Gala, an evening of rare masterpieces. The invitation, addressed to a name she didn't recognize, was a mistake, a cruel tease from a world that had always shut her out. But Rosalise's fingers traced the words, her pulse quickening. Eddie Blackwood, the city's most enigmatic art collector, was hosting. His name was synonymous with wealth, taste, and an almost mythical knack for uncovering hidden gems. To step into his gallery, even for a night, was to glimpse a universe she'd only imagined. She laughed bitterly, tossing the flyer onto a pile of unpaid bills. A gala! In my world, her reflection in a cracked mirror showed a young woman with fierce brown eyes, her dark hair tied back, paint smudged on her cheek. Her wardrobe held no gowns, only thrift store finds. Yet, as the rain softened to a whisper, something stirred in her, a reckless spark. "Why not?" she murmured. "One night to see what they see." The next evening, Rosalise stood outside the Blackwood Gallery, her breath catching at its grandeur. The building loomed like a cathedral of glass and steel, its facade glowing under spotlights. Limousines lined the street, disgorging men in tuxedos and women draped in silks that shimmered like liquid starlight. Rosalise smoothed her simple black dress, bought years ago for a job interview that never panned out. It was plain, unadorned, but it fit her like a second skin, giving her a quiet dignity. Her heart pounded as she clutched the invitation, half expecting to be turned away. The doorman, a stern figure in a crisp suit, barely glanced at the paper before waving her in. She was in. Inside, the gallery was a sensory assault. Chandeliers cast golden light over marble floors, and the air hummed with the clink of champagne flutes and the murmur of cultured voices. Paintings lined the walls, works by masters she'd studied in dog-eared library books. A Vermeer glowed with soft radiance. A Klimt shimmered with decadent gold. Rosalise felt like an intruder, her worn sneakers silent against the polished floor. She kept to the edges, her artist's eye drinking in every detail, her fingers itching for a brush. The crowd parted as Eddie Blackwood took the stage, a vision of effortless charisma. In his late 30s, he was striking tall, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair that fell just shy of rakish. His tailored suit hugged his frame, and his voice, smooth as aged whiskey, commanded the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, gesturing to a canvas unveiled behind him. "Tonight, we celebrate a rare treasure, a rediscovered Caravaggio unseen for centuries." The painting was a dramatic tableau, a saint pierced by arrows, the light and shadow so vivid it seemed to pulse. The crowd leaned forward, entranced, as Eddie wove a tale of its journey from obscurity to his collection, purchased for a rumored $10 million. Rosalise's eyes narrowed as she studied the canvas. Something was off. The shadows were too uniform, lacking Caravaggio's signature depth. The saint's expression felt flat, almost mechanical. She'd seen a true Caravaggio once, in a private collection during a fleeting job as a restorer's assistant. That painting had burned itself into her memory. Every stroke a revelation. This one, it was a lie. Eddie's voice grew fervent, describing the painting's divine authenticity. The crowd nodded, hypnotized, but Rosalise's disbelief bubbled over. A sharp, involuntary laugh escaped her lips, slicing through the reverent silence like a blade. Heads turned, eyes wide with shock. Eddie froze mid-sentence, his gaze locking onto her. The room seemed to hold its breath, the weight of 100 stares pressing against Rosalise's skin. "What's so amusing?" Eddie's tone was ice, his green eyes glinting with challenge. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Who is she?" "So rude." "Doesn't belong here." Rosalise's cheeks burned, but she squared her shoulders, stepping into the light. Her voice, clear and unwavering, carried across the gallery. "That painting's a fake. You're a fool to spend millions on it." The words detonated. Gasps echoed, followed by a cacophony of murmurs. Some guests leaned closer to the canvas, squinting at its details. Others scoffed, dismissing her as delusional. Eddie's jaw tightened, his charm replaced by a flicker of anger. "And you are?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "Rosalise Jenkins," she replied, meeting his stare. "I know what I see." Security moved toward her, their steps heavy, but Eddie raised a hand, stopping them. His eyes never left hers, a storm brewing behind them. "Prove it," he said, the words both a dare and a trap. Rosalise's heart raced, but she felt alive, as if every brushstroke she'd ever made had led to this moment. She pointed to the canvas, her voice steady. "The shadows are wrong, too even, no depth. Caravaggio's light breathes. This is dead. The saint's hand, it's stiff, like a copyist's guess, not a master's truth. I've seen the real one. This isn't it." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some nodding as they noticed the flaws, others laughing at her audacity. Eddie stepped closer, his presence commanding. "You've seen a Caravaggio? Where, exactly?" His tone dripped with skepticism, a smirk tugging at his lips. "A private collection," she said, unflinching. "I don't expect you to believe me, but I know I'm right." Eddie's smirk faded, replaced by something unreadable. Curiosity, perhaps, or irritation. The crowd waited, the tension thick enough to choke on. "You're mistaken," he said finally, his voice cutting. "This piece has been authenticated by experts." The room erupted in laughter, the sound sharp and cruel. Rosalise felt it like a physical blow, but she refused to crumble. "Believe what you want," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm done here." She turned, her head high, and walked toward the exit, the weight of their judgment trailing her like a shadow. As the glass doors closed behind her, the rain greeted her, cold and unrelenting. But inside, a fire burned. She'd spoken her truth, and whatever came next, she'd face it with the same defiance that had carried her this far. Behind her, in the gallery's golden glow, Eddie stared at the painting, a seed of doubt taking root. Who was this woman, and how had she seen what he'd missed? The night was far from over, and Rosalise Jenkins had just painted herself into his world. The rain lashed Rosalise Jenkins as she stepped out of the Blackwood Gallery, her simple black dress clinging to her skin. The sting of the crowd's laughter still burned, but her heart thrummed with a fierce resolve. She'd called Eddie Blackwood's prized Caravaggio a $10 million fraud and walked away, leaving the glittering elite in chaos. The city's neon lights blurred through the downpour, mirroring the storm in her mind. Had she just torched her one chance to be seen, or lit a match that would change everything? She didn't know, but the truth had felt like a brushstroke she couldn't undo. Inside the gallery, the air crackled with tension. Eddie Blackwood stood frozen, his green eyes fixed on the spot where Rosalise had vanished. Her words, "You're a fool to spend millions on it," echoed like a taunt, each syllable a splinter in his pride. The crowd buzzed, their whispers a mix of intrigue and derision. "She's mad," a woman in emeralds hissed. "Look at those shadows. She might be right," muttered a gray-haired collector, squinting at the canvas. Eddie's jaw clenched. He was no fool, and yet a sliver of doubt gnawed at him. Who was this Rosalise Jenkins, and how dared she challenge him in his domain? He turned back to the painting, its saint's anguished face now seeming to mock him. The Caravaggio had been his crown jewel, authenticated by 3 experts, its provenance a labyrinth of documents he'd trusted implicitly. But Rosalise's voice, clear, unyielding, had cut through that certainty. "The shadows are wrong," she'd said, the hands stiff. He stepped closer, his trained eye searching for flaws he'd overlooked. The light did feel flat, the brushwork less vital than he remembered. Or was he imagining it, swayed by her audacity? "Mr. Blackwood," a security guard's voice broke his reverie. "Should we escort her out?" The man gestured toward the doors, where Rosalise was no longer visible. Eddie shook his head, his mind racing. "She's gone. Let her be." The guard nodded, but the crowd's eyes remained on Eddie, waiting for his next move. He forced a smile, the practiced charm of a man who never faltered. "Ladies and gentlemen, a spirited interruption, but let's continue. This Caravaggio's story is far from over." The guests chuckled, reassured, but the mood had shifted. Some drifted to the painting, peering at it with new scrutiny, while others gossiped about the rude girl in the cheap dress. Eddie moved through the room, shaking hands, deflecting questions, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Rosalise's face, those fierce brown eyes, that defiant tilt of her chin, lingered like a half-finished sketch. She'd claimed to have seen the real Caravaggio. Where? And why did her certainty unsettle him so? As the gala wore on, Eddie excused himself, slipping into a quiet corridor lined with lesser-known works. He needed clarity, away from the clinking glasses and prying eyes. Leaning against a wall, he pulled out his phone and dialed his mentor, Mr. Langston, a man whose knowledge of art was matched only by his bluntness. The call connected after 2 rings. "Eddie, it's late," Langston's gruff voice crackled. "What's wrong?" Eddie hesitated, the words foreign on his tongue. "I need you to look at the Caravaggio. Tonight, if possible." A pause. "Why the urgency?" Langston asked. Eddie recounted the gala, Rosalise's laugh, her accusation, the crowd's reaction. She called it a fake, said the shadows in hand were off. I'm not sure she's wrong." Langston's silence was heavy. "I'll be there in an hour," he said finally. "Don't let anyone touch that canvas." Eddie returned to the gala, his composure a mask. The crowd had thinned, but the painting remained a magnet, drawing whispers and sidelong glances. He caught snippets of conversation. Could she be right? Blackwood's been duped? And each one tightened the knot in his chest. He was Eddie Blackwood, the man who turned hunches into fortunes, who saw value where others saw nothing. To be publicly challenged by a nobody, a woman who looked like she'd wandered in off the street, was unthinkable. Yet, her voice had carried a conviction he couldn't dismiss. When Langston arrived, his silver hair disheveled from the rain, Eddie led him to the painting without preamble. The old man adjusted his glasses, his eyes narrowing as he studied the canvas. Minutes passed, each one an eternity. Finally, Langston stepped back, his expression grim. "She's right," he said. "It's a forgery. A good one, but not Caravaggio. The shadows lack his soul, and the hand. It's a copyist's error. Whoever sold you this played you for a fool." Eddie's stomach dropped. $10 million, his reputation, his instincts, all betrayed. "How did I miss this?" he muttered, more to himself than Langston. The old man shrugged. "You trusted the wrong people. But this girl, who is she?" Eddie shook his head. "Rosalise Jenkins. That's all I know." Langston's eyes gleamed. "Find her. She saw what your experts didn't. That's rare." The gala ended, the guests dispersing into the rainy night, oblivious to the bombshell that had just detonated in Eddie's world. He stood alone by the painting, its false saint staring back. Rosalise's words replayed, "I know I'm right." And with them, a spark of something new. Respect. She'd risked everything to speak the truth, and he'd dismissed her. But not anymore. The next morning, Eddie sat in his office, a sleek space overlooking the city's skyline. He'd barely slept, his mind churning with Langston's verdict and Rosalise's face. He called his assistant, a sharp woman named Clara. "Find Rosalise Jenkins. Everything you can. Where she lives, what she does, who she is." Clara raised an eyebrow but nodded. "On it, sir." By noon, Clara returned with a slim file. Rosalise Jenkins, 24. No formal art degree. Expelled from the city's top art school 3 years ago. Reasons unclear. Works odd jobs, cleaning, waitressing. Lives in a rundown apartment downtown. No social media, no gallery presence, but she hesitated. "What?" Eddie pressed. "A contact at a restoration studio says she worked there briefly. Said she had an uncanny eye for detail, like she could see through paintings." Eddie leaned back, the file open before him. A nobody with no credentials, yet she'd upended his world. He thought of her at the gala, out of place, yet unbowed. He needed to know more. No, he needed her. "Get me her address," he said. "I'm going to see her." As he left his office, the rain had stopped, the city gleaming under a tentative sun. Rosalise Jenkins had painted a crack in his perfect world, and Eddie Blackwood, for the first time in years, felt the thrill of the unknown. What would he find when he faced her again? A fraud? A fluke? Or something extraordinary? Only one way to find out. The city sparkled under a fresh-washed dawn as Eddie Blackwood's sleek black car wove through downtown streets, the weight of last night's revelation pressing against his chest. Rosalise Jenkins had called his Caravaggio a fake, and Mr. Langston's grim confirmation, "It's a forgery," had turned her audacious claim into a blade that sliced through his certainty. $10 million, his reputation, all resting on a lie he'd failed to see. Now, armed with a slim file on the mysterious woman who'd upended his world, Eddie was determined to find her. Not to confront, but to understand. Who was she? And how had she pierced the veil his experts couldn't? The file lay open on the seat beside him, its sparse details taunting. Rosalise Jenkins, 24, expelled from art school, scraping by on odd jobs. No gallery presence, no formal credentials, yet a fleeting note from a restorer praising her uncanny eye. Eddie's fingers tightened on the wheel. He prided himself on spotting value art, people, opportunities. But Rosalise had slipped past him, a shadow in a cheap dress, who'd left his gala in disarray. Langston's words echoed, "Find her. That's rare." Her address led to a crumbling apartment building, its facade stained by years of neglect. Eddie parked, the contrast between his polished world and this one stark. Graffiti scarred the walls, and a broken buzzer hung uselessly by the entrance. He climbed the narrow stairs to the third floor, the air thick with the scent of damp plaster and cooking oil. At apartment 3B, he knocked, the sound sharp in the quiet hall. No answer. He knocked again, louder, his pulse quickening with impatience. The door creaked open, revealing Rosalise, her dark hair loose, a paint-splattered shirt hanging off one shoulder. Her brown eyes widened, then narrowed, recognition sparking. "You!" she said, her voice flat but edged with defiance. "What do you want?" No fear, no deference. Just the same fire she'd shown at the gala. Eddie, used to deference, felt a flicker of admiration. "I need to talk," he said, keeping his tone even. "About last night." Rosalise crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "You mean when I called your painting a fake and you laughed me out?" "I'm busy." She gestured vaguely behind her, where canvases leaned against walls, their colors vivid even in the dim light. Eddie caught a glimpse of a half-finished painting, a woman's face, fierce and unyielding, staring back like a challenge. "I'm not here to laugh," he said, stepping closer. "I had it checked. You were right. It's a forgery." Her expression flickered, surprise, then wariness. "Told you," she said, but there was no triumph in her voice, only a tired certainty. "So why are you here? To say sorry for letting your crowd mock me?" Eddie exhaled, choosing his words carefully. "I'm here because you saw what no one else did. I want to know how, and I want you to work for me." Rosalise's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Work for you? The guy who thought I was delusional? Pass." She started to close the door, but Eddie caught it gently, his hand firm, but not forceful. "Hear me out," he said, his voice low, urgent. "I run a gallery that trades in millions. I can't afford mistakes like that, Caravaggio. You spotted it in seconds. That's not just skill, it's instinct. I need that." She studied him, her gaze piercing, as if peeling back his polished exterior. "You need me to save your ego," she said. "I'm not your fix-it girl." "It's not about ego," Eddie countered, his frustration rising. "It's about art. You love it. I saw it in your eyes last night. You knew that the painting's soul was wrong. I'm offering you a chance to use that gift, not hide it in—" He glanced past her, at the cramped apartment bursting with paintings. "This." Rosalise's jaw tightened, but she didn't slam the door. "You don't know me," she said quietly. "You think a fancy offer makes up for years of being invisible? I've been to galleries, studios, and interviews. They see my clothes, my address, and suddenly I'm not a fit. Why should you be different?" Eddie felt the weight of her words, a truth he hadn't faced. He'd built his empire on instinct, but he'd never questioned the barriers others faced. "Because I was wrong about you," he admitted. "And I don't make the same mistake twice. Come to my office tomorrow. One meeting. If you hate me, walk away." She hesitated, her fingers gripping the doorframe. The silence stretched, heavy with possibility. Finally, she nodded, almost imperceptibly. "One meeting, but I'm not promising anything." "Fair enough," Eddie said, a small victory. He handed her a card with his office address. 10 a.m. "Don't be late." As he descended the stairs, the weight of the night lifted slightly. Rosalise Jenkins was no fluke. She was a force, and he'd just invited her into his world. Whether that was genius or madness, he wasn't sure. Back in her apartment, Rosalise closed the door, her heart racing. Eddie Blackwood, the untouchable collector, had stood in her doorway, offering her a chance she'd never dared dream of. She looked at her paintings, each one a piece of her soul, and felt a flicker of hope and fear. Could she trust him? Or was this just another door that would slam shut? The next morning, she arrived at Blackwood's office, a glass tower that gleamed like a beacon. Dressed in her best, a second-hand blazer and jeans, she felt out of place among the sleek receptionists and marble floors. Clara, Eddie's assistant, greeted her with a cool nod, leading her to a spacious office where Eddie waited, his suit impeccable, his smile cautious. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Let's talk about what you can do." Rosalise sat, her chin high. "I'm here," she said, "but I'm not signing up to be your token hire. If I work for you, it's for art, not pity." Eddie leaned forward, his eyes intense. "No pity, I want your eyes, your instincts. There's an auction in 3 weeks. Major pieces, high stakes. Help me vet them. Prove you're as good as I think you are." She studied him, searching for the arrogance she'd expected. Instead, she saw something else, a hunger for truth, not unlike her own. "What's in it for me?" she asked. "A salary, a title, art consultant, and a chance to be seen not as a nobody, but as you." He paused, his voice softening. "I underestimated you once. I won't again." Rosalise felt a pull, the same thrill she got when a painting came alive under her brush. This was a risk, but so was every stroke she'd ever made. "I'll do it," she said finally. "But if you're playing me, Blackwood, you'll regret it." He smiled, a glint of respect in his eyes. "Deal. Welcome to the game, Rosalise." As she left, the city stretched before her, vast and unforgiving. She just stepped onto a stage bigger than any she'd imagined, and the spotlight was hers, if she could hold it. Her agreement to join his team as an art consultant for the upcoming auction felt like a brushstroke on a blank canvas, bold, risky, and hers to define. Eddie's offer, laced with respect she hadn't expected, had cracked open a door she'd long thought sealed. But as she navigated the crowded streets, doubt crept in like a shadow. Could she trust a man who'd dismissed her so easily at his gala? And could she, a nobody with a tarnished past, hold her own in his glittering world? In the weeks that followed, Rosalise threw herself into the work. Eddie's gallery became her battlefield, its sleek offices lined with paintings that whispered secrets only she seemed to hear. She pored over catalogs, cross-referencing provenances, her eyes catching discrepancies others missed, a forged signature here, an anachronistic pigment there. Eddie watched her closely, his initial skepticism giving way to quiet nods of approval. "You're relentless," he said one evening, leaning over her desk as she dissected a supposed Rembrandt. "Most would have missed that. Most don't know what it's like to have nothing to lose," she replied, not looking up. Their eyes met briefly, a spark of understanding passing between them. Eddie was beginning to see her, not just her skill, but the fire that drove it. The auction loomed, a high-stakes event where millions would change hands and reputations would be cemented or shattered. Rosalise felt the pressure, but it fueled her. She wasn't just vetting paintings. She was proving she belonged. Late nights blurred into early mornings, her apartment's canvases neglected as she chased perfection. Eddie, too, was a constant presence, his charisma tempered by a focus that matched hers. They argued over details, brushstrokes, historical context, each clash sharpening their mutual respect. "You're stubborn," he teased once, a half-smile softening his words. "Takes one to know one," she shot back, and his laugh echoed in the empty office. But as the auction drew near, a storm brewed beyond the gallery's walls. Victor Crane, Eddie's rival, and a collector with a venomous streak, had caught wind of Rosalise's role. Victor, whose own gallery thrived on cutthroat tactics, saw an opportunity to strike. 2 days before the auction, a vicious rumor swept through the art world. Eddie Blackwood had hired a disgraced dropout, a fraud expelled from art school for incompetence. Blogs buzzed, socialites whispered, and clients hesitated, their trust in Eddie's judgment wavering. The gallery's phone lines burned with cancellations, and Clara, Eddie's assistant, fielded panicked calls with a tightening jaw. Eddie stormed into the office. A newspaper crumpled in his fist. "Have you seen this?" he demanded, tossing it onto Rosalise's desk. The headline screamed, "Blackwood's Blunder. Hiring a failed artist puts auction at risk." Her stomach twisted as she scanned the article. Its lies, painting her as a talentless opportunist. "They're saying you were kicked out for plagiarism," Eddie said, his voice tight. "Is this true?" Rosalise's hands shook, but she met his gaze. "No. It's a lie, but there's truth behind it." She took a breath, the weight of her past pressing down. 3 years ago, I was at the top art school in the city. My professor, Hargrove, was a tyrant. I challenged his methods, called out his lazy critiques, his favoritism. He hated being questioned, especially by someone like me. She paused, her voice steady but raw. He framed me for plagiarism, doctored evidence, and got me expelled. No one believed me. I've been fighting to be seen ever since. Eddie's face softened, anger giving way to something deeper, empathy. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. "Because I didn't want your pity," she said. "I wanted to earn this," he nodded, processing her words. "This smells like Victor Crane," he said, his voice hardening. "He's been gunning for me for years. He dug up your past and twisted it." Eddie paced, his mind racing. "We need to shut this down before the auction." Rosalise stood, her resolve steeling. "Let me handle it. I know Hargrove's type. Bullies crumble when you shine a light on them." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through old emails she'd kept as proof of Hargrove's vendetta. "I have records, his threats, the fake evidence. If we expose him, it'll discredit the rumors." Eddie hesitated, then nodded. "Do it. But we're in this together." He called Clara, instructing her to contact a journalist friend who owed him a favor. By evening, Rosalise's evidence was in the hands of a reporter known for unmasking corruption. The story broke overnight. Art school scandal, professor's vendetta against rising star exposed. Hargrove's history of targeting students unraveled, his credibility in tatters. The art world, fickle but hungry for truth, began to shift its gaze back to Eddie's gallery. But Victor's sabotage had done damage. Clients still wavered, and the auction's success hung by a thread. Rosalise felt the weight of it. Her role no longer just about proving herself, but saving Eddie's empire. She doubled down, refining her analyses, preparing to face the auction's scrutiny. Eddie, too, rallied, charming hesitant buyers, and leveraging his network to restore confidence. Their late-night sessions grew more intense, a shared determination binding them closer. "We're not losing this," he said one night, his hand brushing hers as they studied a Goya. "Not after what you've done." Rosalise looked at him, the distance between them shrinking. "I'm not here to lose," she said, her voice firm. "But if Victor comes for me again, he'll regret it." The morning of the auction dawned, and the gallery transformed into a stage of velvet drapes and golden light. Rosalise arrived in a tailored blazer, her nerves electric, but her focus razor sharp. Eddie greeted her, his suit impeccable, his eyes alight with something new, trust. "You ready to show them who you are?" he asked. She nodded, a fire kindling in her chest. "Let's make them see." As guests filed in, collectors, critics, and skeptics, the air buzzed with anticipation. Rosalise stood by the auction block, her notes clutched tightly, ready to authenticate each piece. Victor Crane slunk in, his smirk a challenge. But Rosalise met his gaze without flinching. The gavel rose, and the battle began. Whatever happened next, she'd paint her truth across the stage. And no one, not Victor, not the past, would erase it. She stood near the stage, her tailored blazer crisp, but her palms damp, her notes a lifeline in a room thick with judgment. The fallout from Victor Crane's smears still lingered. Whispers of her expulsion, doubts about Eddie Blackwood's judgment. But the exposure of Professor Hargrove's vendetta had tilted the scales. Tonight, Rosalise wasn't just authenticating paintings, she was reclaiming her name. Eddie, resplendent in a charcoal suit, caught her eye from across the room, his nod a quiet vow. They'd face this together. The gallery gleamed, its walls adorned with masterpieces. A Goya's brooding portrait, a Monet's luminous water garden, a disputed Degas sketch that could make or break the night. Collectors in silk and cufflinks filled the seats, their gazes sharp, while critics scribbled notes, ready to dissect every move. Victor Crane slouched in the third row, his smirk a venomous dare. Rosalise met his stare, her resolve hardening. He'd tried to bury her. She'd make him choke on his lies. Eddie took the stage, his voice smooth and commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate art's enduring truth. Let's begin. The gavel fell, and the first lot, a Renoir still life, drew brisk bids, setting a feverish pace. Rosalise's role was to authenticate on demand, her expertise a shield against fraud. She scanned the crowd, her artist's eye catching every flicker of doubt, every raised eyebrow. The weight of their scrutiny was familiar, a reminder of every rejection she'd faced. But she channeled it into focus. This was her canvas now. The Degas came up third, its delicate ballerina sketch, a lightning rod for controversy. Rumors swirled about its provenance, and Victor's campaign had amplified the skepticism. As bids climbed, a collector in a velvet jacket raised a hand. "I need confirmation," he said, his tone edged. "Is this genuine?" The room stilled, all eyes on Rosalise. Eddie gestured for her to step forward, his trust a steady anchor. She approached the podium, her voice clear despite the knot in her throat. "The Degas is authentic," she began, her words cutting through the tension. "Its provenance traces to a Paris estate, 1878, documented in Degas' ledgers. The ink's carbon content matches his known works, and the sketch's fluidity, see the ballerina's wrist, bears his unmistakable hand." She pointed to the canvas, projected on a screen, her analysis surgical. "A forgery would lack this precision. This is Degas." The collector nodded, satisfied, and bids resumed, soaring past expectations. Rosalise stepped back, her pulse racing. But the crowd's murmur had shifted, less doubt, more intrigue. Eddie's glance held a spark of pride. But the night was young, and Victor's presence loomed like a storm cloud. Lot after lot, Rosalise shone. A disputed Goya portrait sparked another challenge, but she dismantled doubts with a cascade of facts. Pigment origins, historical records, the subtle emotion in the subject's eyes that only Goya could capture. "No imitator could fake that soul," she said. And the room leaned in, captivated. Even Mr. Langston, Eddie's mentor, seated in the back, watched with a rare smile, his pen still. Victor, sensing his grip weakening, made a desperate play. During a pause, he stood, his voice dripping with false concern. "Ms. Jenkins, your passion is admirable, but can we trust someone with no formal training? Expelled students don't inspire confidence." The crowd stirred, whispers reigniting. Rosalise felt the old wound reopen, Hargrove's betrayal, the years of being unseen, but she refused to flinch. Eddie started to respond, but Rosalise raised a hand, her voice steady as steel. "Mr. Crane, I was expelled for challenging a bully, not for lacking skill. My training comes from studying masters, from seeing what others miss. Like your own gallery's fake Klimt last year. Gold leaf too modern, wasn't it?" Gasps rippled through the room. Victor's face reddened. He'd buried that scandal, but Rosalise had done her homework. "Art doesn't care about degrees," she continued. "It cares about truth. That's why I'm here." The room erupted in applause. Not just for her words, but for her nerve. Victor sank into his seat, his smirk gone, his sabotage unraveling. Eddie's eyes gleamed, a mix of awe and gratitude. The auction surged forward, each lot a testament to Rosalise's precision. By the final gavel, the gallery had shattered records, the Degas fetching 12 million, the Goya even more. The crowd rose, their ovation a tide that lifted Rosalise's heart. As guests mingled, Mr. Langston approached, his weathered face alight. "Rosalise, you've got a gift rarer than any canvas here. You see the soul of art, not just its surface. Don't let anyone dim that." His words, from a man who'd shaped Eddie's career, hit like a benediction. She nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you, sir." Eddie found her by a Monet, his smile unguarded. "You didn't just save the auction," he said. "You rewrote the room's story. I've never seen anything like it." His voice softened. "I want to fund your master's degree. You're not just an asset, you're exceptional." Rosalise's breath caught. The offer was a door to a future she'd barely dared imagine. But it was Eddie's belief in her that struck deepest. "Why?" she asked, searching his face. "Why bet on me?" "Because you bet on yourself," he said simply. "And I'm starting to see what you see." Their eyes locked, a current passing between them. Respect, yes, but something warmer, unspoken. Rosalise felt it like a brushstroke, tentative but vivid. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice steady but her heart racing. "But tonight we won." "We did," Eddie agreed, his smile a promise of more to come. As the crowd thinned, Victor slipped out, his defeat a silent victory. Rosalise stood taller, the gallery's lights casting her shadow long and bold. She'd proven her worth, but the art world was a labyrinth, and this was only the beginning. Eddie's offer, Victor's lingering threat, the pull she felt toward her boss. They were colors on a palette she'd yet to master. Tomorrow, she'd face them all, but tonight, she was no longer invisible. Rosalise Jenkins had silenced doubters, outwitted Victor Crane, and earned the art world's reluctant respect, her name now whispered with intrigue, rather than scorn. Eddie Blackwood's offer to fund her master's degree hung in the air, a promise that felt both exhilarating and daunting. As she left the gallery that night, the city's lights seemed brighter, but her heart was a tangle of hope and caution. Eddie's belief in her was a lifeline, yet years of rejection made trust a fragile thing. Could she lean into this new world, or would it betray her like the last? In the months that followed, Rosalise dove into her dual life, art consultant by day, art student by night. Eddie's gallery became her proving ground, where she vetted multi-million-dollar acquisitions with a precision that earned quiet nods from even the most skeptical clients. Her evenings were spent in lecture halls, absorbing theory she'd once taught herself from tattered books. The workload was grueling, but it fueled her. Each authenticated painting and each earned grade a step toward a future she'd barely dared imagine. Eddie was a constant presence, his role shifting from boss to mentor, and something harder to name. Their late-night sessions at the gallery, poring over canvases, grew charged with a new energy. He challenged her analyses, not to undermine but to sharpen, his questions as incisive as her own. "Why trust this Titian's provenance?" he'd ask, leaning close, his voice a low rumble. "Because the cracks in the varnish tell a story no forger could fake," she'd counter, pointing to microscopic details. Their debates sparked like flint, but beneath them ran a current of mutual respect, and something deeper, unspoken. One chilly evening, as winter painted the city in frost, they worked on restoring a neglected Bronzino portrait, its colors dulled by centuries of grime. The gallery was empty, save for the hum of a heater and the soft clinking of their tools. Rosalise, sleeves rolled up, applied solvent with a steady hand, revealing the portrait's luminous eyes. Eddie watched, his work paused. "You make it look alive," he said, his tone softer than usual. "How do you see so much?" She glanced at him, her brush still. "I've spent years being invisible. You learn to see what others don't." Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of her past. Hargrove's betrayal, the doors slammed shut. Eddie set down his tool, his gaze intense. "You're not invisible to me. Not anymore." The words landed like a spark, igniting something Rosalise had tried to ignore. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same cloth, and the air thickened, the portrait's gaze seeming to watch them. She pulled back, her heart racing. "Eddie, I'm here for the art," she said, more to herself than him. "I can't afford to mess this up." He nodded, stepping back, but his eyes held hers. "I know, but you're more than your work, Rosalise. I'm starting to see that too." The moment hung, fragile and electric, before she turned back to the canvas, her focus a shield. Yet, as they worked in silence, the distance between them felt less like a barrier and more like a canvas waiting for its first stroke. Their connection deepened in subtler ways. Over coffee breaks, Eddie shared glimpses of his vulnerabilities, how his wealth had come from defying skeptics who saw only a young upstart, how he feared being defined by money alone. Rosalise, in turn, revealed her struggles, the sting of rejection, the nights she'd painted through despair, her father's old sketchbook that still guided her hand. "He taught me to see beauty in broken things," she said one night, tracing a pencil sketch of a cracked vase. Eddie's fingers grazed the page, his voice low. "You're not broken, Rosalise. You're a masterpiece." The words stayed with her, a quiet challenge to trust, not just him, but herself. Yet the art world's glare made her wary. Whispers followed her success, some calling her Eddie's pet project, others questioning if her talent was real or a publicity stunt. Victor Crane, though silenced, hadn't vanished, his influence a shadow that could strike again. Rosalise felt the pressure to prove her worth, not just to the world but to herself. One evening, Eddie invited her to a private viewing of a newly acquired Velázquez, a rare loan from a European collection. The gallery was dark, the painting illuminated by a single spotlight, its knight's armor glinting with quiet dignity. "What do you see?" Eddie asked, standing close, his voice a whisper. Rosalise studied the canvas, her artist's eye tracing every detail. "Courage," she said finally. "He's wounded. See the dent in his armor. But he stands tall. He trusts his strength." She turned to Eddie, their faces inches apart. "That's what you're asking me to do, isn't it? Trust." Eddie's smile was soft, unguarded. "I'm asking you to see yourself the way I do. Not just your talent, but you." His hand lifted, as if to touch her cheek, but he stopped, respecting the line she'd drawn. "Take your time, Rosalise. I'm not going anywhere." The moment shifted something in her, a crack in the walls she'd built. As she left the gallery, Velázquez's night lingered in her mind, a mirror to her battles. She was no longer the girl who'd laughed at a fake Caravaggio. She was a woman carving her place in a world that had tried to erase her. But trust was a leap, and Eddie's presence made it both terrifying and tempting. At her apartment, she pulled out a new canvas, her brushes moving with a fury she hadn't felt in months. The painting took shape, a knight in dented armor, standing against a stormy sky, her face faintly reflected in the steel. It was raw, unfinished, but it was hers, a testament to the trust she was beginning to claim. The next day, Eddie called her into his office, his expression serious. "We've got an opportunity," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "A major exhibition in 6 months. Your chance to curate, to show the world what you can do. But it's high risk. Victor's backers will be there, waiting for you to fail." He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "Are you in?" Rosalise felt the weight of the challenge, but also the thrill. This was her moment to paint her future, not just for herself, but for the bond she and Eddie were building. "I'm in," she said, her voice firm. "Let's show them what we're made of." As she left, the folder under her arm, she felt the canvas of her life expanding, its colors bolder, its lines less certain but alive with possibility. Eddie's trust was a brush in her hand, and she was ready to wield it. Rosalise Jenkins clutched the folder Eddie Blackwood had given her, its weight, a promise and a dare. Curating a major exhibition in 6 months was her chance to etch her name into the art world's unforgiving canvas. But Victor Crane's backers loomed, ready to pounce on any misstep. The past months had transformed her. Eddie's mentorship, her master's studies, and their growing bond had kindled a trust she'd once thought impossible. Yet, as she stepped into the crisp morning, the city's pulse mirrored her own, exhilarating, but edged with fear. Could she rise to this, or would the spotlight burn her? The months blurred into a frenzy of creation. Rosalise scoured private collections and obscure archives, selecting pieces that spoke of resilience, works by overlooked artists, their stories echoing her own. She spent sleepless nights crafting a narrative for the exhibition, each painting a brushstroke in a larger tale of defiance. Eddie was her anchor, offering resources and insight, but never overshadowing her vision. Their late-night planning sessions grew intimate, laughter mingling with debates over color palettes and lighting. Once, as they hung a test piece, a fiery O'Keeffe landscape, their hands brushed, and Eddie's gaze lingered. "You're building something extraordinary," he said softly. Rosalise's heart raced, but she deflected with a smile. "So are we." As the exhibition neared, whispers of Victor's interference resurfaced. Anonymous tips questioned her chosen artist's authenticity, forcing Rosalise to triple-check provenances. She felt his shadow, but refused to falter. Eddie, sensing her strain, arranged a quiet dinner at his loft, a rare pause. Over candlelight and wine, he shared his battles, how he'd clawed his way up, defying those who saw only his wealth. "You remind me of that fight," he said, his voice raw. "You see the world differently, Rosalise. That's your power." His words fortified her, their bond a quiet strength she no longer questioned. The night before the exhibition, Rosalise walked the gallery alone, its walls now a tapestry of her vision. A Kahlo self-portrait glared defiantly. A Basquiat's raw lines pulsed with rebellion. Each piece was a mirror to her journey, from the girl who'd called out a fake Caravaggio to the woman ready to claim her place. Yet, nerves gnawed at her. What if Victor's backers swayed the critics? What if she failed Eddie's faith? The opening night arrived, the gallery aglow with anticipation. Guests in couture and tuxedos filled the space, their murmurs a low hum. Rosalise, in a deep blue gown that hugged her frame, felt both exposed and invincible. Eddie, dashing in black, stood by her side, his presence a steady pulse. "This is your night," he whispered, squeezing her hand. She nodded, her resolve steeling as the crowd's eyes turned to her. She took the stage, her voice clear. "Tonight we celebrate artists who refuse to be silenced. Their work isn't just beauty, it's survival." She wove through the exhibition story, her passion igniting the room. Critics scribbled furiously. Collectors leaned closer to the canvases. Victor, lurking at the edges, watched with a scowl, his allies whispering. But Rosalise's authenticity disarmed them, her knowledge unassailable. When a critic challenged a lesser-known artist's inclusion, she countered with a cascade of historical context, earning applause. Mr. Langston, Eddie's mentor, nodded from the front row, his approval a silent crown. As the night peaked, Eddie pulled her aside, leading her to a hidden alcove. The gallery's lights dimmed, revealing a surprise. Her paintings, once confined to her apartment, now hung under soft spotlights. A stormy seascape, a fierce woman's portrait, her soul bared for all to see. Rosalise's breath caught, tears pricking her eyes. "How?" she whispered. "I found them when I visited your place," Eddie said, his voice thick. "They deserve to be seen. You deserve it." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Rosalise, you've painted my world with courage, with truth. I love you, not just for your art, but for you." He knelt, a sapphire ring glinting in his hand, its hue a match for her boldest works. "Will you marry me?" The world narrowed to his eyes, his words a color she'd never dared paint. Her past rejections, betrayals faded against this moment. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Eddie." He slipped the ring on her finger, their kiss a vow sealed under her art's gaze. The crowd's applause drew them back, unaware of the alcove's magic. The exhibition was a triumph, critics hailing Rosalise's vision, Victor's allies silenced. As she and Eddie rejoined the guests, hands entwined, she felt her life's canvas expand. The girl who'd laughed at a fake was now a woman whose dreams hung on these walls. Her love, a masterpiece yet to be painted. The sapphire ring on Rosalise Jenkins' finger caught the gallery's golden light, a vivid emblem of her new beginning with Eddie Blackwood. Eddie's proposal, sealed under her art's gaze, had transformed her world. But as they stepped back into the crowd, hands entwined, Rosalise felt the weight of what lay ahead. Their love was a masterpiece, but the art world's relentless gaze and Victor Crane's lingering shadow promised challenges yet to come. Months later, their engagement sparked a whirlwind of creation. Rosalise and Eddie launched the Jenkins Blackwood Foundation, a bold venture to unearth and uplift undiscovered artists. Their mission was personal. No talent would be buried by poverty or prejudice, as Rosalise's nearly had been. They scoured studios and backrooms, finding painters, sculptors, and visionaries whose works rivaled the greats. The foundation's first showcase, held in a renovated warehouse, drew crowds and critics, its raw energy a testament to their shared dream. Rosalise, now a respected curator, spoke with a fire that silenced doubters, while Eddie's charisma secured funding to keep the vision alive. Yet, Victor's influence persisted, his allies sowing doubt about the foundation's legitimacy. A forged painting surfaced at their second event, threatening scandal. But Rosalise's keen eye caught it before bids began. "Victor's desperate," she told Eddie, her voice steel. "He can't stand us winning." Eddie, his jaw tight, rallied their team, exposing the forgery's source, a dealer linked to Crane. The art world, tiring of Victor's tactics, began to turn, and the foundation's reputation grew stronger. Their wedding, set in a sculpture garden under a Miami sky, was a canvas of their lives. Roses from Rosalise's old neighborhood bloomed alongside rare orchids. Her paintings hung as vibrant backdrops. Guests, artists, mentors, even Mr. Langston, mingled, their laughter a chorus of shared triumphs. As they exchanged vows, Rosalise's voice trembled. "Eddie, you saw me when I was invisible. I promised to paint our future with every color I have." Eddie, eyes glistening, replied, "You're my masterpiece, Rosalise. Let's build a world that sees everyone." Their kiss, under a shower of petals, sealed a partnership beyond love, a legacy. Years later, the foundation flourished, its artists reshaping the global art scene. Rosalise, now a master's graduate and sought-after curator, stood beside Eddie, their empire a beacon for the unseen. One evening, in their Miami loft, surrounded by canvases from their travels, Eddie traced the ring on her finger. "We did it," he said, his voice soft. "From your laugh at my gala to this," Rosalise smiled, her heart full. "That laugh was my first stroke. You gave me the canvas." She glanced at a new painting, a vibrant cityscape, its figures bold and free. "This is our legacy, Eddie. Not just art, but lives changed. As they stood together, the city's lights sparkling beyond, Victor's shadow was gone, his schemes buried under their success. Rosalise and Eddie, once strangers, had painted a world where talent triumphed over doubt, love over fear. Their story, like her first defiant laugh, was a masterpiece that would endure. What a journey Rosalise and Eddie have woven, from a daring laugh to a love that reshapes the art world. Did Rosalise's bold defiance inspire you? Or did Eddie's transformation steal your heart? Drop your thoughts and city in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us in this vibrant tale of talent and triumph. Subscribe to catch more stories that spark the soul, and we'll meet you again soon for another adventure. Until then, keep painting your masterpiece.